He adjusted the warm and heavy hat on his head, smoothed the rich velvet of his crimson robes, and watched the soft snowfall. The air was sweet and brisk, and the anticipation of sleeping children hung in the atmosphere like tinsel. Beside him, silent and immense, stood his friend. His presence was a stark contrast to his own. His companion's crimson eyes held a weary intelligence, and his massive hands clutched a bundle of birch branches tightly, his claws long and sharp. "Another good season, my friend," Nicholas said kindly, his voice a soft rumble. "The children here have been mostly mindful of their studies and their parents. Good children." He let out a joyous laugh, his eyes twinkling. Krampus let out a low huff of breath that misted the cold air. "Mostly," he rumbled. "Children lie, some steal, others disobey. We guide them back to the light, old friend." Nicholas reached up and placed his hand on his friend's shoulder, looking into his crimson eyes. "We do not punish the minor slips of childhood," Nicholas said gently. For centuries they had worked together. Nicholas brought light, hope, and sweets for the virtuous. Krampus, his companion, was the necessary balance, walking behind him as a chilling reminder of consequence. He was the shadow that defined the light, the threat that kept the little ones on the narrow path. The children feared him, a fear so powerful they would listen and obey as soon as their parents whispered the name of Krampus. The pair worked in quiet harmony of the ancient European knights, a partnership forged by tradition, brothers bonded by fate. As the years marched on, the old ways faded, replaced by a softer, gentler age where fear was no longer the favored tool of guidance.
One winter's eve, high in the remote alpine peaks after a long night of rounds, Krampus finally spoke of the tension growing within his monstrous heart. "The balance is broken, Nicholas," he said, staring down into a valley sparkling with electric lights. "You are celebrated, welcomed, loved. I am merely tolerated. A dark joke, a costume at a party. The message is blurred. The children no longer fear real consequence. They simply anticipate your generosity." "Your purpose is vital," Nicholas insisted, though his tone held a hint of sadness. "You are the shadow that makes the light possible." "No," Krampus whispered, the chains around his waist rattling with a finality that chilled the saint more than the mountain wind. "I will not be ignored. I am the spirit of the wild hunt, the consequence of true darkness, not a secondary character in a tale of candy canes and jolly old men." Krampus's voice was deep and steady. A chill went through Nicholas. Krampus looked at his brother, his eyes softening slightly with a strange mix of respect and resolve. "The children of the world now seek a different kind of guidance, one you are better suited for," Krampus continued. "My path is older, darker, and primal. I must leave your path, that of St. Nicholas. I will forge my own." Nicholas offered no argument. He knew the truth in the beast's words. He nodded, a silent knowing. This was the end of their long, intertwined destinies. With a final, mournful clanging of chains, Krampus turned and loped into the darkest part of the pine forest, his fur blowing in the winter winds. With every step further, the light of his brother faded, and an old darkness once again rose.
We are back for another Christmas road snack, and we hope you are enjoying them so far. Christmas, it's not all warm and fuzzy.
No, it is not. And if you've been listening, you may be thinking that too. But today we are talking about the demon royal of Christmas, the evil that haunts our children at Christmas, and that is none other than
Krampus.
Krampus, yes, the very dark and evil counterpart to St. Nicholas, aka Santa, the big man who steals the show every Christmas season with his love and joy and all things light and bright. We've seen Krampus in horror movies, and you may have even seen him on vintage Christmas cards. And I will say it again, with every episode we do, Christmas gets weirder and weirder.
So true. And what is up with those Christmas cards? I mean, those vintage ones, they are flat out bizarre. Merry Christmas. Here's a card with a demon goat man stealing some kids.
Demon Goat Man is right. And we started this episode off with his partnership with Saint Nick. Now let's see what happened when Krampus finally did go out on his own. As Krampus made his way into the dark winter night, his purpose became clear, the dark mountains swallowing him whole. He shed the constraints of the saints' partnership, the chains that once symbolized a tethered, controlled existence, a mere seasonal reminder. They became symbols of fear and untamed judgment. His appearance shifted. His matted fur that had been merely dark became the impenetrable black of a starless night, thick as pitch and smelling of wet earth and winter snow. His horns, once large, grew enormous, twisting like lightning bolts into the sky, sharp at the tips and dark as polished onyx. His form elongated, gaining height and muscle, a sinewy powerhouse built not for accompaniment, but for the hunt. His deep crimson eyes began to glow with an internal hellish fire, and his tongue, a long, rough thing, occasionally snaked out between his sharp, yellowed fangs, tasting the frigid air for the scent of genuine malice. Krampus was no longer just a festive dark joke for a single night of the year. Krampus became the mountain's shadow, made real, the swift, uncompromising executioner of profound misdeeds. He walked the wild places, listening not for childish fibs or unpolished boots, but for the true wrought in human hearts. His new destiny led him to those who had moved past mere naughtiness and into cruelty, greed, and true spite. Gone were the warnings. Dark judgment stood on massive hooves and was now free. He came for the town bully who didn't just push a boy down for a toy, but for those who pushed down the innocent in spirit. He came for the thieves who stole the last loaf of bread from struggling widows and children. When Krampus found a wicked soul, the snow stopped. The air would turn frigid, more intense than one could handle, the sound of their environment muffling to a terrifying silence, as if time stopped, only to be broken by the clang, clang, clang of his approaching chains.
He no longer left switches or coal. His punishments were swift, visceral, and final. He would burst from the shadows in a whirlwind of fur and iron, his terrible roar freezing the blood in his victim's veins. He would wrap the transgressor in his heavy, sparking chains, binding them tight as a mummy, and with the flick of his massive wrist, throwing the struggling, screaming soul into the heavy wicker basket strapped to his broad back. Then, with the speed of an avalanche, he would retreat into the mountain. The truly naughty children and wicked adults alike were dragged back to his icy lair, a cave deep within the frozen heart of the Alps. He was no longer a legend or a partner to a saint. He was the fear of consequence made real and hungry. In the depths of his glacier lair, beneath a ceiling of dripping ice, Krampus dispensed his own form of judgment. This was not the quick scare of the old village days. He judged based on the weight of their deeds, the true measure of their cruelty, and the darkness within their hearts. The methods were varied and tailored, a chilling mirror of the harm they had inflicted upon others. For those whose malice was a fleeting shadow, a lesson in empathy was delivered with an icy touch, leaving a mark not on the skin, but on the soul. A reminder of the cold consequence of their actions. But for those whose hearts were truly frozen, whose cruelty was a fundamental part of their being, Krampus offered no redemption. His judgment was absolute. These individuals were taken not to be punished in return, but to be removed from the world entirely, their capacity for inflicting pain extinguished forever within the ancient ice. Krampus is the silence of the heart of winter, a force ensuring that the darkest hearts would find no warmth in the Christmas embrace.
You don't want Krampus to come find you at Christmas, do we?
Oh no, none of these creatures that we've talked about really. Well, maybe that tiny spider. If I had to have one that came and visited me, I would pick the spider. Yeah, Krampus is the worst so far in that he has taken up the reins of judgment. He has decided that he is the judge, jury, and in some cases, the executioner of those who are naughty on Christmas.
He is. And believe it or not, he just keeps getting darker. Mary, have you seen, I think it was maybe a decade ago now, but have you seen the movie Krampus? I mean, that is one wild film, I got to tell you.
You know, Haley, I actually took the kids to see that on Christmas Eve when it came out. And you're right, it was about 10 years ago. And it is something to watch. And, you know, Krampus has been in a lot of horror movies, and most of them are B-rated slasher films. Mike didn't want to go see it with us. He's not a fan of the horror, whole scary vibe thing. And I don't blame him.
So it's kind of like he's Santa and you're Krampus.
Wow, did you just call me Krampus? Yeah, I'm a little bit darker than he is, and he's just that all around good guy. You know that vibe.
Yes, we both are very blessed to have great men in our lives. Brandon does like a good scary story. He's kind of into that. But as we have mentioned in the past, we have a little problem with focusing and staying on topic. So back to Krampus.
Okay, we'll focus here. Krampus. And this will not be a big shock for you, but he got his origins in what, Haley? Can you guess where Krampus got his origins?
It absolutely is going to be pagan festivals.
There it is. That's right. Pagan festivals, and specifically the winter solstice. So again, we're going to get that overlap with the 12 days of Christmas when demons are said to be more active. And I wonder why. Could it be because people are unknowingly worshiping them?
It is so weird.
Krampus is linked to the pre-Christian pagan rituals that honored the spirits and warded off the darkness during the long winter nights. He shares characteristics with a god, and I can never say his name, Cernunnos. I'm just going to spell it for y'all. Cernunnos. And if you take some time and look up some photos of him and then make him dark and give him some chains, yeah, they could very well be the same god. And those chains that Krampus has, people theorize, came from when the Catholic Church adapted him into the Christmas narrative, and they tied Krampus to the devil.
The Catholics, they kind of have a complex relationship to our frenemy Krampus. The Catholic Church historically opposed him due to his devilish half-goat appearance and trying to ban celebrations since the 12th century. And if you look into it a little bit further, the Catholic Church, they really viewed him as a demonic anti-Saint Nicholas. But a few modern traditions, especially in Austria and Germany, blend him with Saint Nicholas as a cultural figure. I guess it's all about where you live. We are certainly not Catholic. And, apologies to all my friends. I actually have some friends who are Catholic. So apologies to them, no attack there. But if you are, let us know and send us a note. Let us know your take on this topic from a Catholic perspective. I've read that some Catholic leaders, like Archbishop Gustavo, he objects to Krampus parades, calling them frightening and nightmare-inducing.
I don't think most religions who recognize Jesus would be like, "Yay, Krampus night," and have him in their church bulletins. You're not gonna see that. They're not gonna be like, "Don't forget next Saturday our Krampus parade." That's just not gonna happen. Unless maybe they were teaching on why Christmas is not to be celebrated, or perhaps they were teaching on how the Christmas celebrations are all tied back to the pagan festivals and are all intertwined.
The pagan rituals around Christmas is definitely nothing new to us. I remember hearing about this even when we were growing up, not just for the research for today's podcast. But back to your point, that would make for an entertaining Christmas play at a church. You'd have all the dark characters come out one by one while someone narrates how terrifying they are with the origins, and they're all dancing around on stage. You'd have Mary Lude, Krampus, Little Callus, Baba Yaga, and then I think maybe you would just then cut to the nativity scene. I keep saying it, but it is weird how Christmas is so intertwined with all these pagan festivals and rituals. We have December 25th as the day of Christ's birth, thanks to, once again, the Catholics. And Pope Julius I set December 25th as the official date of his birth. And that shifts the focus from the pagan sun worship to Christ's birth as the Son of Righteousness. And I'm not saying, you're like your son or your daughter. It is S-U-N, Son of Righteousness, but still incorporating traditions like feasting and evergreen trees, like what we see in today's modern times and Christmas celebrations.
They just like to dig their claws into everything. And speaking of claws, that is what Krampus means, claw. It comes from an old German word. I too don't hate the Catholics. I love them. Some of my good friends are Catholics, and I get it. It's a passed down heritage. It's just the Vatican specifically. They have a lot of darkness within those walls and so many secrets. And I don't think people realize how much of what the world takes as religious celebrations today was influenced and shaped by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, Mary, I know. But again, we're going to focus on Krampus, the Christmas devil. Let's get back to the dark side of Christmas.
Just stick with me here. Krampus, Christmas, and religion kind of are all tied together to make sense of the Christianization of all these pagan worships going on with Christmas. The Catholic liturgy and the church invented a legend from nothing. And the legend says something like this, that in the times of famine, young people in small mountainous villages used to disguise themselves using furs made of feathers and hides and horns of animals. And being so unrecognizable, they were tempted to terrorize the inhabitants of nearby villages, robbing them of the supplies they needed for the winter season. And after a while, the young people realized that there was an imposter among themselves, and it was the devil himself. And he was taking advantage of using his evil face to enter into the group because they couldn't tell who he was, except for the fact that they could see his goat's feet. And so Bishop Nicola was called to exorcise that disturbing presence, and the devil was no longer able to terrorize and plunder like he once did, or to beat up the bad children. So he was giving chains to bind the evil in him, and he would from then on accompany the bishop who had defeated him, who of course later became Saint Nick. So even though Saint Nicholas never came to the Alps, and this is an unlikely legend, it was enough to legitimize the figure of Krampus.
So they took the devil, exorcised him, put chains on him, and then put him into the Christmas celebration.
From what I could dig up, people were trying to make sense of the celebration of the birth of Christ and all these pagan festivals that were still happening all at the same time. You got to go back into their mindset. When pagan festivals, they just worship the winter solstice and all of that. But then all of a sudden the church comes along and says, oh no, it's the birth of Christ. But yet they're still using all these elements from these old pagan festivals in the celebration of the birth of Christ. So they were trying to merge Christmas with the pagan worship, and basically that's what it was. So, Krampus, once a frightening tradition, now he just became this cultural phenomenon that you see in parades, or that the Catholic Church said, oh no, he was the devil. Saint Nick defeated him. And so now he's, got to follow Saint Nick around for all eternity to warn people not to be bad and not to be evil. So again, it's just weird. Krampus is terrifying.
Mary, do you think it's fair to say that during these times of the pagan worship and how it kind of transcended into what we know as Christmas today, when you think about them going back to those early times, and between, it might be bold of me to say this, but a connection between those pagan rituals and witchcraft, and how it's kind of been covered up with what we would think to be acceptable traditions and celebrations today.
Yes.
Or is that a stretch?
No. I think if you start digging into these things and you start really wondering, like, well, why do we drag a tree in from outside and put it into our homes and things like that? When you start looking at the roots of why people did it, then you realize that those are all pagan festivals, and all those festivals were wrought with God worship and witchcraft. You're making offerings and you're asking for blessings from gods and not the God, the living God, Jesus.
I just kind of think about the explanation of why we do what we do in today's modern times. You know, Christmas is just a weird time. Just remember to pull it back to Jesus and continue to keep it weird.
Until next time, everyone, Merry Christmas. Enjoy your celebrations.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.